Walk into almost any lumberyard, ask for a raised bed kit, and you'll be handed something 4 feet wide. 4 by 8, most likely. The magazine plans say 4 feet. So do the cedar kits, the galvanized ones, the composite ones. University Extension bulletins land in the same place, 3 to 4 feet for a bed you can walk around. Call a size standard often enough and it starts to feel tested, as though thousands of people measured something, and this is what came back. Something did get measured. Just not the thing most people assume. That 4-foot width rests on one claim about arm reach. An adult can reach about 2 feet. 2 feet from one side, 2 feet from the other. Nobody steps on the soil. Decent argument as far as it goes. What it has never been is a balance measurement. Nobody stood a 65-year-old on damp bark mulch with a full watering can in one hand and asked how far she could lean before her weight left her feet. 2 feet describes where fingertips get to. It says nothing about where the rest of the body is while they get there. Those are 2 different distances, and the space between them is where that small lurch at the edge of a bed comes from. The one that makes you plant a hand on the frame, then straighten up and pretend nothing happened. The gap leaves evidence, though. Your bed leaves some, the ground you stand on leaves some, and your own body leaves the clearest of all. The whole set can be read in under a minute with no equipment, and the most reliable reading happens at the back of your shoe. First, what the 4 is made of. Because the 2 numbers in 4 by 8 come from completely different worlds. The 8 is a sawmill decision. Framing lumber sells in 8, 10, and 12-foot lengths, so an 8-foot board makes one long wall with no cuts and nothing left over. A milling convention, nothing to do with people. The 4 is an anatomy estimate with a name attached. Mel Bartholomew, a retired engineer, published Square Foot Gardening in 1981 and took it onto public television, where a generation of American gardeners met the 4 by 4 box divided into 16 1-foot squares. The stated reason for 4 feet was arm reach. An adult can usually reach 2 feet, exactly the distance from edge to center. Extension services echoed it, kit makers built to it, and 40-odd years later, 4 feet is simply what a raised bed is. Notice what that reach figure was hired to protect. Not the gardener, the soil. The 2-foot rule existed so nobody would have to step into the bed and compact it. Whether the gardener stayed upright while reaching was never part of the calculation, because for the audience Bartholomew was writing for, it took care of itself. A short detour, and not a garden one. When federal accessibility standards took up the same question of reaching across an obstruction, they refused to treat depth as free. Under the 2010 standards, a forward reach over an obstruction tops out at 25 inches deep, and once it passes 20 inches, the height you may reach drops from 48 inches to 44. Depth costs something. The code writers built that in. The bed builders never did. So what did the 4-foot rule skip? Stand still and your body balances a tall, heavy object over a small rectangle. That rectangle is your base of support, the area under and between your feet, and it's smaller than it feels. Your center of mass sits around navel height. While the downward line from it stays inside the rectangle, your ankles hold you up with quiet, unnoticed effort. Clinicians put the usable envelope for standing sway at roughly 8 degrees of lean toward the toes and about half that toward the heels. Not a large margin. Reaching forward spends it. Your arm goes out, shoulders and trunk follow, the center of mass slides toward your toes, and the pressure under your feet migrates forward to meet it. Somewhere before the front edge of your toes, the ankle runs out of leverage. From there, staying up takes a bigger move. Folding at the hips, throwing an arm back, or stepping. Out in the open, that step is a stumble you walk away from. At the edge of a bed frame, with a shin already against a board, it often has nowhere to go. This bites harder after 60 because the forward margin has been measured and it shrinks. In 1990, Pamela Duncan and colleagues published a test built around exactly this question. Functional reach, they called it, and it doesn't measure arm length. It measures how much extra distance a person can buy with lean before the feet have to move. Feet planted, one arm straight out, reach as far as you can without stepping. Record the difference. The numbers are quietly startling. Men between 20 and 40 averaged just under 17 inches of that reserve. Men between 70 and 87 averaged about 13. Women in the older group averaged around 10.5 inches, with wide variation between individuals. 2 years later, the same group followed a couple hundred older men living at home for 6 months. Those reaching 6 inches or less had roughly 4 times the odds of falling twice in that half year. Between 6 and 10 inches, about double. Which reframes the business. Your fingertips cover 2 feet, fine. The question is how much of that is borrowed from a reserve that has been shrinking since your 40s, and what else in the moment is spending it. Start with the sign that matters most, because if you take one thing away from all of this, take this one. Notice what your feet do during the work you already perform. If reaching the center during ordinary weeding, planting, or harvesting makes you lift a heel, drop a hand onto the frame, or take an unplanned step, the bed may be too wide for you. You do not need to stage the movement or push it further. The small adjustment that already happens in normal use is the useful part. Sometimes it is quieter than that. You rock onto the ball of one foot, your toes grip inside the shoe, or one heel goes light while the other stays planted. None of those is a diagnosis. They are simply signs that the last few inches of bed are asking for more balance than the first few. A wide, flat cap rail changes the picture because it gives your hands somewhere useful to land. That support can make an existing bed far easier to work, and there is nothing wrong with using it. Just count it as part of the setup. The same width may feel completely different on a bed with a thin edge and nowhere to brace. The next clues have nothing to do with the reaching and everything to do with where you stand. Ankle balance works by pressing against the ground. If the ground gives, the press is wasted. Standing on a soft, compliant surface reliably increases sway, partly because some of the ankle's effort vanishes into the surface deforming, partly because the sensation coming up from the soles gets less informative. Fresh bark mulch does this. So does deep wood chip, loose gravel, saturated spring turf, the soft shoulder of an old path. There the ankle stops being enough sooner and the body reaches for the bigger, slower hip response, the last thing anyone wants to discover at full stretch. The ground matters because the bed is never used in a laboratory. If the path prints, dents, or squelches under an ordinary step, your margin there is smaller than it would be on concrete. A firm, level path is the fix, and extension guidance already suggests roughly 3 feet between beds so a cart can pass. That width does double duty. It lets you stand square to the bed instead of twisting to reach past a corner. The frame belongs in the same calculation because a raised bed will not let you stand where you otherwise would. Every inch of board, cap rail, or footing that holds your toes back is an inch added to the working reach. Two beds with identical inside widths can behave very differently depending on how much frame sits between shoe and soil. Height rides along too. Over a low bed, the trunk travels further out to reach the soil, while a taller one may set your feet back. The number printed on the kit never captures all of that, and those conditions change. A path that is firm in dry weather can soften after rain, and an edge that felt comfortable in one season may ask more of you in another. That is why the way the bed behaves during real work matters more than one perfect measurement on one perfect day. Now, what is in your hands? This one surprises people, and the size of the effect is the surprising part. In 2018, Hill and Price tested healthy older adults, average age around 66, holding a grocery bag in one hand, loaded to 5, 10, or 20% of body mass. 5% barely registered. 20% produced the largest increases in sway they measured. Their practical suggestion: where falls are a concern, avoid one-sided loads heavier than about 5% of body mass. For someone weighing 170 pounds, that is roughly 8.5 pounds. Now weigh what actually gets carried out to a bed. Water runs a little over 8 pounds a gallon, so a filled 2-gallon can is close to 17 pounds hanging off one arm. Around 10% of body mass for that same person, double the suggested ceiling, and carried toward the far side of the reach where its leverage is greatest. Separate work on stability limits agrees. People leaning as far as they could came close to their theoretical maximum with empty hands and measurably less while handling a load. Consider how you actually use the bed. Wet ground, soft paths, tools, and watering cans all reduce the margin. So a width that feels comfortable with empty hands can stop feeling comfortable during real work. A full can, a loaded bucket, or a heaped trug in one hand also takes away the free arm that would normally help you recover. A trowel or pruners weigh almost nothing, but even those matter if they snag on a stake or cage at the far end of the reach. The last clue set is the body itself, and it is the subtlest of the four. Head position first. A study of 28 healthy adults between 60 and 80 tested standing balance at various angles of head and neck extension and found instability appearing around 30 degrees. Tip the head back past that point, and the sway measurements climb. Gardeners tip their heads back more than they'd guess, reaching under a trellis, around a tomato cage, up a bean tower. Progressive lenses add to it. To see the far edge clearly, you aim your head where the right part of the lens is, which is often not where your balance would prefer it. Attention is the other half. In 1997, researchers in Sweden noticed something in frail nursing home residents that became one of the best-known observations in fall research. Some stopped walking the moment a conversation started, and those who did were far more likely to fall over the next 6 months. That population was frailer than the average gardener, so don't read a diagnosis into it. Read the principle. Staying upright draws on attention, and when attention goes elsewhere, the balancing gets worse. None of this turns conversation into a home balance test. The useful point is simpler. Staying upright takes attention, and ordinary garden work spends some of it. Looking through progressive lenses, reaching around a trellis, answering somebody behind you, or handling a watering can make the same bed feel different. If normal work repeatedly makes you hold your breath, brace against the frame, or abandon the center of the bed, believe the pattern. There is no reason to recreate the worst moment on purpose. Before building, mock up the edge and center at the planned height with boxes, a table, or anything stable. Work only inside the range that feels ordinary, with both feet settled and no need to chase the last inch. The moment the design would require a lifted heel, a supporting hand, or an extra step, bring the center line closer. You are choosing a comfortable working width, not measuring a maximum reach. So, the rule. For a bed, you can reach from both sides. The width should stay inside twice your comfortable working reach, measured from where your toes can actually stand, outside the frame. For plenty of gardeners past 60, that points toward 3 feet or 3.5 rather than 4. That is already inside the range extension services publish, with the difference that the final choice comes from the way you actually work. For a bed against a fence, wall, or hedge, the arithmetic is harsher than people expect. One-sided access does not shave a little off the width. The whole bed has to fit inside one reach because there is no second side to finish the job. That puts you at 18 to 24 inches total, which is why Iowa State's guidance for a bed reachable from one side is 1.5 to 2 feet, against 3 to 4 for a bed you can walk around. Half the access, half the bed. If you garden seated, treat the accessibility figures as a ceiling. Reach depth over an obstruction is capped at 25 inches forward and 24 to the side, and those are outer limits for a fixed base, well past comfortable working distances. One-sided seated beds want to be under 2 feet. Two-sided ones are usually happiest at 3. What would change the answer? A firmer path buys margin back. A narrower frame does too. So does planting the middle band of an existing bed with things you never need to handle mid-season. So the reach you actually perform is shorter than the bed is wide. Nobody has to tear apart a 4-foot bed they already own. They just have to stop reaching across all of it. One boundary deserves naming plainly. If you have fallen twice in a year, if you have had a near fall doing something completely ordinary, if you get dizzy standing up out of a crouch, or if reaching during normal work makes you grab for support, then bed width is a small piece of a larger question, and the person to take it to is your doctor or a physical therapist. Balance responds to training, and a clinician can assess it properly in a short visit. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has noted that fewer than half of older adults who fall ever mention it to a clinician. A shame, because it is one of the few risks here that responds well to being talked about. The same reasoning works on the bed you own, on one at the garden center, or on one a neighbor is about to build. The right width belongs to your body, your path, your tools, and the way you garden, and no catalog has ever been able to put all of that on the box. If this changed how you see the bed outside your door, All helps it reach other gardeners who have felt that lurch and shrugged it off, and subscribing keeps this sort of thing coming your way. I am curious about one thing in particular. Is there a part of your bed you routinely skip, brace for, or approach from a different side because the center is just a little too far away? Put the width in the comments. Somebody looking at the same 4-foot kit may finally stop and think about how they will actually use it.